me.
Hello and welcome to In Case You Missed It, the podcast where we talk about movies that we think are good, that nobody saw, but we think they should have seen them anyway. I'm Scott Schultes. With me is my co-host, Josh Reese.
Hello.
And today we are talking about the movie Furiosa, a Mad Maxwell saga. And we're going to see if Josh and I like this movie and if we have it in us to make it epic enough for you to watch it. So this movie, if people don't know, is and this came out, last year, right?
Yeah, 2024. 2024.
Did it come out this year? Yeah.
It did, yeah.
Already, I'm underprepared.
May of 2024.
You're correct. And it came out this year, and it's a prequel to Mad Max Fury Road, which I think Josh and I both have agreed is one of the greatest action movies ever made.
Absolutely. I agree with that.
Absolutely fantastic. Speaking of Mad Max, Josh, have you seen, outside of these Furiosa and Fury Road, have you seen any of the other Mad Max movies?
I watched them I think just before Fury Road came out, just because I'd never seen them and I'm like, oh, this looks cool. I'll just get into this world. So I watched them all and I didn't really get the hype. I thought they were fine.
Yeah.
I was like, this is cool, but I enjoyed it. And at this point now I haven't watched them again and I kind of forget exactly what happens in them. What about you?
I have never seen any of the original three.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I was actually in the mindset you were before Fury Road came out, because I saw the trailer for Fury Road and I was aware of Mad Max, but I saw the trailer for Fury Road. I'm like, I've never seen anything like this. Like, this looks spectacular. Yeah. And we'll talk about it even with this movie. Just, it looked like it was just full of imagination. And I always forgive movies for certain things if I feel like there's a lot of imagination put into it, because that's something that Hollywood is greatly lacking. So anyone who's willing to take a chance on ideas is good. But the funny thing is, before I watched the original three, before Fury Road came out, I asked some people who had seen Mad Max about them and if they were worth watching. Nobody could really recommend them. And my understanding is the original is absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Like when people think of Mad Max, the original is absolutely nothing like that.
Yeah.
Near as I can figure, he's in the original one. It's not so much a post-apocalyptic world, so much as just a really lousy neighborhood. Like,
I think that's kind of right.
Because he's
like, what I can remember,
he is a cop, but it's not like the apocalypse. I think that all starts with the second one. But
yeah, and I know Road Warrior, the second one, is kind of the one that people are like, oh yeah, this is the one.
It's like the definitive Mad Max.
Yeah, not anymore, but I'm sure.
No, not anymore. But yeah, so and then in 2015, Road Warrior, I did it, and Fury Road came out, and I know he spent a lot of time. George Miller spent a long time trying to make this. I mean, back when he was going to have Mel Gibson star in Fury Road, so he did that, and due to scheduling issues, budget issues, Gibson issues, that never happened. So, and that's a whole different story for a completely different podcast about God damn it, I'm going to keep saying that. So anyway, but if anyone doesn't know, Fury Road has character, and people have argued that Mad Max Fury Road is not about Max so much as it's about Furiosa, played by Charlize Theron. Yeah.
It really is. It's kind of like it's more of Mad Max's point of view of Furiosa's story.
Well, one thing I liked, and this is getting into Mad Max and watching Fury Road originally, I liked this idea with the Mad Max movies that there is no set continuity, and people are arguing about how old Max would be in Fury Road compared to how old Furiosa is and how long ago the world collapsed. and how it doesn't line up. He'd be like well into his 80s or something. But, George Miller, the director and writer, has always said that Mad Max doesn't have a set continuity. It's a series of stories. It's a series of legends. People are, if you're watching a Mad Max movie, you're being told a story by someone who may have been there or watched it. And there's always been talk that Tom Hardy's Mad Max is just a different person from Mel Gibson's Mad Max. So that's just what it is. So anyway, Furiosa here is Furiosa is a prequel to Mad Max Fury Road, which I would say, and a couple other people have done it, and Josh, maybe you can think of some more examples than I can think of, but I think I like this idea, or at least the way this was handled, that in Fury Road, we are introduced to Furiosa as a character. We learn just enough about her to root for her, and that's it. And we learn a tiny bit about her background and all this stuff. And then you do the prequel. Then you do the origin story. And I kind of like that. The only other example I can think of where they did this was when Marvel introduced Black Panther in Civil War. People got introduced to the character. We learned just enough about him to root for him. And we didn't really get an origin story. That wasn't the first Black Panther movie. But then we got a movie about him. And I really liked that. What'd you think of this movie, Josh?
I was excited to see it, but both of us, we talk about why this movie didn't do well. Neither of us saw it in theaters, so we're part of the problem. For whatever reason, we didn't see it in theaters, but it was one that I was excited about. But
that was it. And you're absolutely right. I was going to get around to it. I was excited about it. And I think, but I also think part of that might be the reason. It's the reason it bombed in general. Let's start with that. Because unfortunately, this movie reviewed extremely well. Yeah. Very, very well. And Fury Road, people love that movie, kind of a cult classic. It reviewed extremely well. It did okay financially. Fury Road did. It did good enough. But then this movie came out and there was a lot of hype around it and people were, I was excited. I liked the character of Furiosa. I was anxious to see this movie, and the trailers come out and George Miller's doing his thing again. So why wouldn't I like this? But then I didn't I couldn't be asked. I don't know. It came out in theaters. I just never got around to it. And I don't know. Why do you think that is, Josh? Why do you think this movie bombed? Nobody saw it. Yeah.
I don't know. Is it because of the long, complicated title? Maybe people don't know what it's about. Probably not, but it's not like it's a complicated title. But are people getting tired of prequel origin stories of things? I don't know if that's true either. Or people just are like, oh, I saw Mad Max that was good enough for me. I really don't know. It's hard to say.
I mean, just to see what comes up, I did a quick Google search just to see. I mean, I have my own ideas, but the Google search said something about this movie didn't have enough. The Google search just said this movie didn't have enough star power. Chris freaking Hemsworth is one of the leads in it. It said Anya Taylor-Joy was not enough of a draw. I would say maybe to the general public, you and I who watch a lot of stuff, we've seen The Queen's Gambit. We've seen stuff she's been in. Why wouldn't you see it? It was kind of like when the first Hunger Games came out, and this to a lot of people, this unknown Jennifer Lawrence was a breakout. It's we saw Winter's Bone. This girl's great. So she's going to be good in that. So I don't know about the star power thing. There was also the idea that, people don't want to see a female-led action movie. I just can't stress enough how little the gender of the main character factors into my decision to see a movie.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I couldn't give less of a shit. And she wasn't new.
No.
If you saw Fury Road, you saw her. I would argue one thing that didn't help this movie is Fury Road came out in 2015.
Yeah.
This is 9 years later.
Yeah.
I feel like George Miller's the kind of guy who he's not going to do sequels. He's not going to do, new things with his movies unless he's got it. So he's not going to rush out a sequel. I respect that. 9 years is a little long.
Yeah.
So I think,
and part of it is like and Charlize isn't in it. People maybe miss that, but yeah, I think you're right. 9 years is a long time to put a sequel out, but it's not something he's going to rush until it's right.
And the thing was, that didn't bother me. Like that was the other thing. They were like, well, Charlize Theron isn't it. First of all, I know people know who she is, but it's not like how often does she have a movie come out? Maybe once a year.
Yeah. She's
not in a lot of stuff. I don't know if she picks and chooses. I don't know. She has an interesting career that we might get to if we ever talk about a movie she's in, but I guess technically she's in this one. But I don't know. And I don't know what delayed it. It's not like there was a few things. I wondered if, cause Anya Taylor-Joy was announced as the lead in 2020. So I don't know if COVID delayed this movie. I don't know. You could spend all day talking about why this movie failed.
Yeah.
I mean, it was one thing bad.
Yeah. One thing that's actually interesting. I mean, it did take a long time to come out, but I read that they actually they had a draft of this script before Fury Road was even, I think before Fury Road started production, even. I think the world is so interesting in both these movies that I think it's so well defined. It's a weird world that it's in, that it's set in. And I think it's so well defined, but there's like such a confidence in the weirdness of it that I think that I know they wrote that screenplay of Furiosa's backstory to give to cast and crew as like research of like what things to do. And I think that really helps the kind of cohesiveness of all the strange things that are happening in this world and the way it looks. And I know they even also wrote like a novella of like Max's backstory of the year before Fury Road came out. And that was given to cast and crew. And a lot of times you can be like actors being like, oh, I wrote a whole backstory on this character just to help me with my performance. And it just sounds like a really pretentious thing. And it can be, but because you're not going to see all that in the performance. But if you give it to cast and crew who are like doing production design and things like that, I think it helped this movie just kind of have a better vision of what George Miller really wanted, and help the confidence of like, this is the world we're set in. It's weird and we like it that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And again, I think this is why these movies, certainly the last two, didn't have a lot of mass appeal, is they're so weird and a little gross.
Yeah.
But that's what I love about them. Like we were talking about, I was talking about imagination in this movie. That's what I love about it. I'll forgive certain things just because like so much is on display. He shows us new and interesting and just weird things, but it all fits in this world, this bizarre world that kind of collapsed. And it sounds like it collapsed because of nuclear war, which may have been caused by shortages of oil and gas or something like that, or maybe water or both. I don't remember. But I love it. We'll talk about some of the imagination stuff. Boy, I cannot talk today. The imagination stuff in this is just this world, and it's all his. It feels like it's all George, and that's why. So when I watched this the first time, I was not feeling it, like the whole first half. It's a lot happens in this movie. It's 2.5 hours long, which feels a little long for this type of movie. A lot happens in it. And, but the whole first half of this movie is really kind of not about her. It's about Dementis, played by Chris Hemsworth, who's incredible in this.
Yeah, he's having so much fun.
I mean, what do you think of Chris doing this? And he's coming off of Thor. I guess he's not done with Thor, but
yeah. And I wonder, as a quick aside, I wonder if it's like not hot Chris Hemsworth didn't help the box office either.
He's even got a fake nose on.
Yeah. No, I really loved him as the villain in this. I think it's at first you're like, I was wondering, is he going to be the main villain of this movie? Like, is he just kind of leading us to like Immortan Joe being like the main bad guy of the whole thing? But I think he's having so much fun with it, and each scene he's in, you just discover this new like terrible thing about. You're just like, this guy is awful. And each scene is like just a new thing where he's just going way over the top with what he's doing. But I think he's fantastic in it.
He's great. And I know, one thing I read something that the voice came from a combination of his grandfather and a seagull is specifically what he said. I think his performance is good because when you have sort of this like crazy villain, I felt like the performance at times was begging to either lean into Heath Ledger's Joker or Jack Sparrow. And I don't think he ever went too far into that because I think, unfortunately, thanks to Heath Ledger's Joker, it's hard to do a crazy villain anymore without feeling like you're just copying him. But Chris is great in this. I know he did it because he wanted to do something different. There's a darkness to him and there's a charm to the character, I think. Like, I actually wrote a note that just said it's interesting when food is so scarce in a world that is called a wasteland. That man can still maintain some pretty big, beefy arms. But I like it. I like it in the sense that it really illustrates, like, he's got these big muscular arms because he's built like Chris Hemsworth is. But it illustrates to me the fact that this man is all show. And I think he does some things successfully. He takes over Gastown successfully with a pretty good idea. Well, it's a good idea. It's executed poorly, but I was thinking about that because, like, and you see as the movie goes on and how his empire kind of falls apart, how he is a lot of show. Now, he obviously, to get all these people to follow him, he has to succeed some of the time. But yeah, he gives grand speeches with his big microphone. He's got his big cape. He's got, but he talks about, and he talks about giving people a better life and making the wasteland better for everyone. But he's all show. And that's why I was like, I kind of like the idea that he's this big muscular man because he's very superficial. Yeah. And deep down, he's kind of in over his head. But I thought it's a fun character. It's a villain we don't get to see. And yeah, like you said, his nose, like it's a prosthetic nose, which is just, I love that he was just a little too handsome. Chris was just a little too handsome to play this character.
Yeah, that's true.
So yeah. And one thing you talked about was, I love how this movie expands on the wasteland. I like that we get to see the green place in its prime, which is mentioned in Fury Road. I like that we see there's 3 fortresses. You have the Citadel, which is in Fury Road. You have Gastown, which is where all the fuel is, and you have the Bullet Farm, which is where all the bullets. And it's food, water in the Citadel, gas in Gastown, and bullets in the Bullet Farm. Those are the 3 things that have any value in the wasteland. Yeah, and I like how it's kind of this very delicate tightrope ecosystem they have. Well, we're going to give you food and water if you give us gas, and we'll give you food and water. And they're all trading with each other. And it takes one nut job to throw that out of balance for it all to just descend into chaos.
That's true. And like you said, we finally see the green place. The thing I like, though, is that I feel like a lot of origin prequel stories and I don't know if I call this an origin story, but a lot of prequel stories might like start and kind of set up the character in their home and do like 30 minutes on like, oh, here she is living her life and all this thing. But I think what this does well, that Fury Road also does well, is this jumps you right into the action while introducing us to this world, but also giving us action, because we see her in the green place, she's like picking a peach, but it's like that jumps us right into the action when the biker gang shows up. We're not spending time of her like with her mom going to like, oh, go get the whatever and stuff. I don't know if I'm not explaining this well, but no, we see enough of it to know like, oh, that's what we heard about in the last movie, and we don't dwell on it. And it just gets us right into the story and right into the series of events that get us to where we're going, rather than a long subdued intro.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, it's interesting you bring that up because one thing I said, like, I thought the first half of this, the first time I watched it, I felt like it kind of dragged. The second time was better because I know where it's going. And the second half is great. It picks up the pace. And I felt like, because Fury Road, was famous for being basically just one long car chase, and it has such a momentum to it. And I kind of went into this movie assuming it would be similar, and it's not. It's a different kind of movie. But it's interesting. They don't dwell on her mother, I guess. And mother is almost shorthand for these two have a close relationship. But yeah, it's interesting. Actually, speaking of the Green Place, my first note on this is nobody in this movie is a good person. Because, and I'm sure you can't just give away all your food and water and whatever, and their resources are limited. But the Green Place's only law seems to be, if anyone finds this, you have to kill them.
Yeah.
You can't let them find out about it. Like that's the first reaction to anybody coming to the Green Place is murder them.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's everyone in this is a bad, and you could argue it's all about survival, and you could argue that, in this post-apocalyptic world, everyone's trying to survive and everyone's kind of lost their minds. That's sort of the point.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that it's, Fury Road is like this one long car chase, basically to get there. And then we chase everyone. It's go there. Oh, it's not there anymore. Okay, let's come back. It's basically what the movie is. And this movie has it's a lot of different action sequences in this movie, but a lot of like starts and stops.
Yeah.
Where it's like, where Fury Road is really building the whole movie. This one has a lot of ups and downs, I feel like, which I mean, you can't really necessarily replicate that by telling this story that spans this amount of time, so many years. So it makes sense. But yeah, it's definitely a different kind of vibe, but in the same world.
Yeah, and this is a movie that, Fury Road it's a single story. It doesn't quite happen in real time, but it's pretty close as far as them driving all the way out and driving all the way back. But this spans about 15-ish years of Furiosa's life. One thing I didn't expect was you don't see Anya Taylor-Joy until halfway through the movie.
Yeah.
Which was kind of odd. And again, the whole first half of the movie, it's building up Dementis. And who he is and all this stuff. And that was actually one thing. My second viewing of this, I was like, it works, but there's a few scenes that I feel like after they kidnap Furiosa as proof that there's a place of abundance that exists, her mom tries to save her, who frankly look like, if anyone, she's Finn Wolfhard's mom, not Furiosa's mom. It's a dude from Stranger Things. She looks like Finn Wolfhard, doesn't she?
Does, yeah.
She looks like Finn Wolfhard's mom.
That's true.
She does not look like Furiosa's mom. Anyway, but after they capture her, her mom tries to save her. They end up kidnapping her mom and killing her right in front of her, and then they take her for her whole life. But the very next sequence after that is, I forget what he calls it, but Dementis has it looks like they've stopped a gang of people. They tied who I assume is their leader up by his arms, legs, and his throat up to 5 motorcycles with chains. And then there's like 4 people to a motorcycle, and they all have to fight to kill each other to get on a motorcycle. And then they all drive separate ways. And I assume that's their leader, rip them apart. And that's how they get, and that's kind of how Dementis gets people, to join his gang. Do we need that whole scene in a movie that's 2.5 hours? Like it introduces a teddy bear, Dementis's teddy bear, which is just sort of something he holds onto because he mentions that his family, his wife and his children were killed with the fall of the world. So, but do we need that whole scene?
We probably don't. It's because I think you could argue that it's like shows like the dark side of this character, but we get plenty of that as we go through. There's plenty of scenes where we see, oh, this guy is like, you don't think he's a good guy at all from the beginning or anything, but you kind of just see how dark he has become as we go along. So I don't think we probably didn't need that scene. Or at least not that length of it.
The two things I like that we established is, one, we established the teddy bear, and 2, we established this woman. She's one of the people that has to fight to get on the bike, and she gets her face all torn off by a chain or a hammer or something. I love that we have this mini story of her This woman is impossible to miss. Her like upper lip gets ripped off and she's got 2 huge gashes in her forehead. So she's easy to spot when she pops up later in the movie. But we see her joining Dementis's gang, and then she helps take over Gastown later, and then she ends up dying at the end. But I like we have this whole woman's Dementis career like sprinkled throughout this movie. Well, you talk about the darkness of Dementis, and that's what this and it does illustrate it well, but it's also like, do we need more scenes of this? But I want to talk about Dementis's cape, which is
nice
something. It's is it a parachute, or it looks like it's just it looks like a tarp, like a plastic tarp, but it's white. Yeah. And the colors of it change throughout the movie. And it starts off white, like he's introduced and he's got it as like it's even got a little hood on it, but it's pure white. And I think it's this idea. And I think the color of the cape, I don't think it represents him. It represents how he sees himself. And I think when it's white, to himself, he is this angel of hope. And he talks about hope throughout the movie. And so I think he thinks he's doing the right thing. He wants to make the wasteland a better place. He's going to take over Gastown to make it a better place for the people that follow him. And I think he knows some of the stuff he does is bad, because out of the gate, he's killing people. Yeah. But I think in his mind, his ends justify his means. And part of the reason he wants to make the place better, and this all comes up at the end of the movie, and we'll talk about it, is I think he wants to make it better because he did lose his family to the wasteland. We never find out how they died, but he had kids and he had a wife, and he lost them. So at the very beginning of the movie, it's white, and I think this is a Dementis that still has some hope that he can make the world a better place, or at least his world a better place. And at the same time, he's also got the teddy bear with him, which again represents his family. And then later, early on in the movie, when they're on their way, they're trying to find the green place. They come across one of the war boys, which this is how they get to the Citadel. If people don't know what all the lore we're talking about is, we're not going to explain it. You got to watch the movie. Yeah. But he comes across a war boy, and they've got those flares that he says it's like a blood flare. And they shoot it in the ground, and he gets covered in this. Dementis gets covered in all this. I assume it is blood, because the blood is precious to the war boys. So he gets covered in blood, but it turns his cape red. And I think this is a Dementis that it's a Dementis that is willing. The people he's now killing people for the wrong reasons, again, in his mind. Mm-hmm. Like when they try to take over Gastown, they try to pretend they've taken the war rig, but they're trying to pretend like they're attacking it so that Gastown will open the gate to save them. And the Gastown isn't buying it. So what Dementis does is start killing his own guys to make it more convincing. And one of his followers, gang leaders, starts to call him out on it.
That's a good point. I didn't think of it. I didn't think of it that way.
We'll come back to his cape.
But I do like that thought of it.
He's more of a bloody, more of a ruthless Dementis.
And I was going to bring up that scene of the taking over Gastown where he starts killing his own guys. So I'm glad you brought that up. Because that's a bit. I feel like that's the big moment where I'm like, oh, this guy really is.
I think that's him starting to lose hope. Mm-hmm. When it's white, he still has hope, and when it's red, he's starting to lose it. Yeah. And later, we'll come back to it. But later, when it turns black, I think it's gone. I think his hope is gone.
Yeah.
This movie was criticized out of the gate when the trailers came out, because one thing that Fury Road got a lot of credit for was that it was mostly practical. And I think it was as practical as it could be. I think it was the kind of movie that if they could do it safely and realistically, practically, they do. There's a scene in Fury Road where those guys are like swinging on those almost like pole vaults kind of thing. Yeah. They're swinging on it. But this movie took a lot of criticism because it has a lot more CG in it. I don't know, Josh, what do you think? Did that hurt anything for you? Do you think it took anything away from the movie?
To me, it's definitely something I noticed. I definitely noticed it right off the bat. And even like in some of they do a lot of character, like it seems like a lot of like facial change, like even the young Furiosa, I feel like they did something with her eyes where it's like really stands out, and it's like that stuff is what kind of threw me a little bit. Just kind of the things that were not within action sequences. I think within the action sequences it still worked for me, but I wonder if they did a lot more CG, because I'm sure it was, for this movie, it was maybe cheaper to do it that way, maybe easier. There's so many different types of sequences in this movie that I'm sure that they doing practical for all the different things they wanted to do was just kind of a logistical nightmare, I'm sure. Whereas Fury Road, Fury Road is, I'm sure, was extremely difficult as well, but at least we're kind of like, we're all driving in a straight line and we're doing these action sequences. So it's like, I think maybe logistically it was easier to figure out how to do these things. So I didn't get bothered by the action sequence CG work. It was more of the subtle character things that kind of threw me off when we weren't within action sequences.
It's funny you say that about Young Furiosa. I did read something. I didn't read a lot into it, so I don't have all the details, but that is actually done with AI. So apparently they used AI as Young Furiosa gets older, especially the closer we get, because it's a different actress. But the closer we get to her being Anya Taylor-Joy, they used AI to alter her face to make her look more and more like Anya Taylor-Joy. You and I have talked before that Anya Taylor-Joy has a very interesting look about her.
Yes.
But they used it. Now, George Miller also was like, obviously AI is why, actors and stuff went on strike. But this AI is not, there's nothing wrong. It didn't really take a job from anybody.
No.
I would argue it's not like they hired less VFX people or anything like that. So, and it didn't take a job away from an actor or anything like that. So,
no.
And I think I believe George Miller even said like the use of AI in this was consensual. So I believe he probably talked to the actors about doing that. So and I think, and you figure this it spans about 15 years. So I don't know if they did it on anyone else or not. The only place the CG really took me out of it, because it's done pretty well. I didn't actually look up who the VFX house was. It was. The only place it really took me out of it is right at the opening sequence one of the early sequences when Furiosa's mom is taking her away from Dementis's camp. There's like a little canyon. I don't think that canyon's real, because there's some shoddy keying, like green screen effect when Furiosa and her mom drive through that. It's really bad. Did you notice that?
That, now that you bring it up, yeah, that is true. Yeah.
But that's the only place. That's the only place in the movie where I went, ugh, like, and I think you're 100% right. I think the scale of this movie forced more CG, because I looked up this and Fury Road have basically the same budget. And actually they have about the same budget, and you could argue with inflation, they would have had a little less to spend on Furiosa than they did Fury Road. So I wondered, I think the scale did it. I also wondered, because if you've ever watched anything on behind the scenes about the making of Fury Road, I almost wonder if George Miller didn't go, I am not doing that again. Because it was a nightmare. It was a logistical nightmare. They pulled it off, but it was insane between making cars, running cars, the stunt work, safety. And my understanding in Fury Road, though, for all as practical as I was, there wasn't any serious injuries on set. Yeah. So I wondered if he himself was like, the studio may have been like, well, for insurance and all that, we don't want to do it. He might have been like, great, I don't want to do it again either.
Yeah.
Because I think that would have been just exhausting.
Yeah. I also wonder because I feel like Fury Road had a lot of the action sequences in there had a very interesting look, where they would do kind of sped up things where like under cranking the camera, where they don't really, I mean, you can do that digitally now with any frame rate or whatever, but under cranking is when they would shoot, like back when they were shooting on film, they would shoot less frames so that when less frames per second. So then when it plays back, things are moving faster, and you can see it like in like you'll see silly fast movement in like older action movies, like pre 2000s, pre 90s, where you'll be like, that movement looked like it was sped up. And obviously it was, just because what they were limited to work with. And I feel like Fury Road had some of that, but it not done in a silly way, where it was practically like sped up and things like that. And I think this movie had a lot of that too, but I feel like maybe the integration of the CG with that made it feel even more fake than you would notice. Cause I feel like maybe that's what people are also noticing is just like the movement. The movement is strange, like in the action. It's very, very fast paced, obviously. But like, I'm even thinking of like just random, like the guys swinging on poles in Fury Road. I mean, that looked great, but then there's like other things where people are like flipping over cars. People are like landing on cars. It's like everything's moving very fast. And I think that they probably did a lot of speed manipulation there. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but I think in Furiosa, they do a lot of that as well, but then mixed with CG work can really make that stuff stand out. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And I agree with you that there's a lot of George Miller has such a distinct style, at least in these films. I mean, have you seen any of George Miller's work outside of Mad Max?
Not for a very long time. I'm trying to think like even like Babe. That's all I can think of really.
There was Babe. Well, he did Happy Feet. I don't know if he did the. I think he did the sequel.
That's right.
I think Happy Feet won. I don't know. I feel like I started Happy Feet, and I'm like, I'm not feeling animated penguins today. Right. And he did that Genie movie recently. I can't even remember who's in that. Oh, it came out like last year. It was a movie about. It's not Helen Mirren. It's some woman. Anyway, she kind of opens. She finds a genie in a bottle, and he gives her 3,000 years of longing.
Oh, right. Yes.
Kind of an odd duck of a movie. Man, George Miller does his own thing, though. I mean, props to him for just doing his own thing. It's got Tilda Swinton and Idris Elba. I was way off with Helen Mirren. But no, I ask you because I don't think. I mean, I haven't seen Babe in a very, very long time, so I don't remember. But these movies have such a distinct look about him, and the way he shoots action and edits action, like you said, there's a lot of speed ramps, which is when you in the middle of a shot you change the speed of it, whether it speeds up or slows down. Most people tend to do. We were talking about Zack Snyder before we started recording. Most people tend when they do a speed ramp, they slow it down. Everything starts at normal speed and slows down. George Miller does the opposite. Sometimes he'll speed things up. Sometimes he'll speed up camera movements. But it gives it such a distinct look. There's that. I love the way he films these. I love his use of long takes, which is something that you could criticize of 99% of action movies made these days is everything is cut to death. Even Marvel, even when Marvel was making good movies, come at me. The movie, they're just like fight scenes are cut to death because no one either wants to spend the time or knows how to shoot action. But even when the first Matrix came out, and I was watching that because that was so popular and that redefined action in American cinema, one of their inspirations was old Kung Fu movies, which old Kung Fu movies were made by doing long takes of this fight choreography and somehow not chopping the crap out of it made it look better. So that's what they did with The Matrix. And I feel like George Miller is doing this exact same thing with this movie. And he did it with Fury Road too. And it's this idea of, and I love filmmakers who are willing to say 3 things with 1 shot, then 3 things with 3 shots. Use 1 shot to give me 3 pieces of information, whether it's through camera movement and choreography and planning. It looks like he planned his shots more than, that was a big thing with Fury Road is that it was difficult to film, but George planned out that entire movie frame by frame in his head. Yeah. And so I think that's done so well as he does long takes and it's little stuff. Some of it's done for comedic purposes. There's a thing at the end where Dementis and some of his guys are like running away and then Furiosa shoots one of them. And it's just 1 shot after they fall off of them riding over a hill, stopping their bikes. Dementis gets off the bike, runs back towards camera and lays on the ground with a telescope to see what's going on. Like that just works. Most people
Yeah.
would have chopped that into 5 or 6 shots, and George didn't. He just let the camera run, and it makes him look nuts. It's almost funny the way, if you don't cut that, it's almost a funny shot, and it makes him look crazier.
That's true.
So I love that. I love George's, he's got his own style when he does it. And that's why, like I said, I think this drags a little in the beginning, but to me, that also is representative of something that's driven by a single creator. Mm-hmm. He has a single vision. So it's not polished to death.
Yeah.
It's got flaws.
Yeah. And I think I saw something about Fury Road that I saw this a while ago that I had never noticed, how pretty much everything is centered to the frame. Like,
yes,
he's, there's a lot of the rule of thirds where like things are more pleasing to like put on like the not totally centered in frame off to the slightly to the side, just framing shots. But he's like, no, I'm going to put what's important right in the center of the frame. And that's what you're going to look at. And everything off to the side of it is great, but this is what I want you to see. And he does that. He, like, in his action sequences, he's like, this is what we want to look at right in the middle of the frame. And he doesn't overcut it. Like you said, it's not like he's like cutting to a bunch of different things. He's just keeping the camera focused on what is interesting. And I mean, everything in this world is interesting, but it just kind of makes the action scenes just hit a little better, where we're not losing track of what's happening.
And I actually think, and this is a lesson for new filmmakers out there, centering everything in the frame gives him the option to cut quickly, because sometimes there are quick cuts, especially in this and Fury Road. He did a lot of quick cutting. This was also the technique done in John Wick, because John Wick has a lot of quick cuts in its action scenes. Is you can cut quickly, you can get away with it if you keep everything centered in frame. And I know for Fury Road, they even did a lot of that in post-production. To make cuts work, is they would scale up and crop shots and move them around. So your eye isn't having to move around as you're watching the action scene. You can cut quicker if an audience can keep their eye in one spot, typically the center of the frame. You can get away with cutting quicker. Mm-hmm. So it's a great technique.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just. God, George is he's a great filmmaker. He really is. I love what he does. I should watch more of his stuff. He deserves more credit than he gets, but he loves filmmaking, and he's so passionate about it. And you can see that in all his work and his, even a movie like this that's done by Warner Brothers, it's just George's fingerprints all over it. He really got to just make his own movie, something that studios should be doing more of.
Yeah. You don't get that trust with like, there's only kind of a handful of directors that kind of get to do their own thing. And his name, I feel like his name isn't like super well known to just kind of, there's like, Nolan and Tarantino and stuff like that. But I feel like George Miller's name isn't as nearly as big as those, but they still give him the freedom to kind of make it how he wants it to look.
And the big reason for that is probably his movie. Like you mentioned, Nolan and Tarantino are the best examples of writer-directors that studios want, because their movies are well done. They're critically acclaimed. Audiences like them, and then they make a bunch of money. Unfortunately for George, for whatever reason, his movies don't make a lot of money. Unfortunately, if you talk about ROI on his films, I actually don't know about Mad Max 2 and 3, but I know Mad Max 1 they made for like 10 grand or something. It was nothing. Yeah. And it made $100 million. Probably his most successful movie to date. But that's it. You do have, in George Miller, you have a writer director that's just full of ideas and an excellent filmmaker. Unfortunately, his movies just don't do it. Although he's the best example of why we wanted to do this podcast.
Very true.
You and I were talking about the movie Red One before this started, and I was telling you how I kind of like a lot of the shade. I watched it recently. It's not terrible. I'm not recommending it. In case you missed it, good. But how the most of it doesn't necessarily do anything wrong, but it also doesn't try anything new. It doesn't say anything. And a lot of the criticism Red One's taking is it's so bland. And you and I were like, this is why people might not watch Mad Max movies, because they're a little weird. They're off the beaten path. Good. Watch something takes you out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, this is like I was saying. This is kind of what I was saying on our last episode about Barbarian when I was comparing it to Hard Drugs. where it's like, get yourself a good high, try something new.
Exactly. Barbarian was a great example of that. Like, we were talking about the 2X structure of that, and that may or may not work for people. And, but yeah, and actually, and I don't know that it bothered me too much, but this movie is broken up into chapters. I'm not sure why.
Yeah.
I mean, why?
That's true. Yeah.
I don't know.
It kind of takes me out. I don't know. That sometimes takes me out when that happens. Yeah, I don't know if I know exactly why. Because I mean, we obviously see the passage of time. It's not obvious, so it doesn't need to be broken up.
Well, what's weird is, yeah, you're right. I feel like the chapters, when the screens come up talking about a new chapter, it's to show a passage of time. And it's weird he does that, because if I can come back to what I said before, that this movie is just, it's drowning in imagination. No one has anything to drink, but it's drowning in imagination. And one of the shots specifically is when Furiosa is a kid, and first time she cuts all her hair off and she makes a wig out of it. And then the guy, what's his face, is obsessed with her hair. And then she runs away while he's playing with it. And he throws it, and it lands on a branch on a cliffside. And to show the passage of time, he shows a time lapse of that tree growing out of the side of the cliff with the wig on it. Mm-hmm. So, George, if you've got ideas that fucking good to show the passage of time, you don't need to do something as unimaginative as chapter cards.
That's true. That's a good point.
Couple other things really quick I wanted to mention that I just think are so full of imagination in this. Dementis's motorcycle chariot. You tell me, is there something cooler you've seen in the last year in a movie than a fucking motorcycle chariot? He's got the little chariot thing. I don't know what it's called. And instead of 3 horses, he's got 3 fucking motorcycles, and he's got little reins for him. That is the coolest goddamn thing I have seen in a very long time.
That's right. It's funny. Like did you ever play like the Mad Max video game?
I played a bit of it.
Where it's like, it's kind of all about like going around, like beefing up your car and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And I think it's similar to like games we were talking about like even a little bit ago. But yeah, just it's very interesting. The vehicles that are in this movie, it's very imaginative. Cause I mean, that's all they have. They're like, they have to make their vehicles work and build a war rig. And so it's really cool to see like how imaginative that stuff is. I feel like a much, much weaker filmmaker would have done something with the premise of, well, a war over oil is what destroyed the earth. But I like how George he keeps pushing that and how far into it. As a result, cars are worshipped. The War Boys, I don't know if you knew, you tell me if you knew this, because I didn't know until recently, but the War Boys have this thing where they link their 4 fingers together and they point up. Those are supposed to their fingers sticking out like that and crossed represents a V8, the pistons of a V8 engine. I had no idea.
Isn't that cool? That's why they do that over their head in a very religious fashion. It represents a V8 engine. That's cool. But one car, I was actually trying to look, and I haven't seen Fury Road in a little bit. I was trying to remember cars that are in Fury Road, and I wondered if they did it again. And there's one, and I don't know what type of car it is, but it's basically, what kind of car do you call it? Not a sports car per se, but basically they stacked one on the other. Do you know what car I'm talking about?
Oh,
and I think it's actually like a Morton Joe's vehicle in Fury Road, where it's like 2 cars stacked on each other and in the back, and it's pointed out. What a great design, like just endlessly imaginative. I love his name is the Octoboss. First of all, I love the look of the Octoboss. He's wearing all black in the sun, like a lunatic. But he's got this like black featureless helmet on his face, and he's got horns coming out of it. But I love he's got a little like I don't even know what you would call that, with a little propeller on it.
It's like like a fan, like basically a fan.
It's like parasailing, but he's got his own, rather than being pulled by something. He's got like a fan that kind of helps it fly. He's got a chain gun on it, like a minigun, and it's just a bunch of AK-47s tied together and spinning. And I'm like, that's the coolest thing.
Yeah. It's
I
cool.
love,
Just thinking about like trying, like it's like what would be left over in this world? Like what kind of things would they put together? It's really cool.
The way they make clothing feels like it was just lashed together out of what they had in cars, and that's why I love too when they make the first war rig. That's what they spend all their time on. They're all malnourished, they're all sick, but they rather spend their time building this war rig that's all like the war rig in Fury Road is black. It's all beat up. It's not very flashy. It just looks like a big semi. But this one it's chrome. It's got murals carved into the side. And they worship this fucking truck. Like that's the way people are. And what a fun world. I do wonder with Dementis, because I do like this character. I wonder, I know I've met a lot of women. I know a lot of women and possibly men, probably men, who watch Marvel movies for Thor because they want to watch Chris Hemsworth. And I just wonder, he spends a lot of time in this movie shirtless, and I wonder how many of those women would enjoy watching Thor rip his own nipples off to achieve orgasm.
It's a fair question. I don't know. There's a lot of nipple stuff going on in this movie.
Oh my gosh, you got the guy, what's he called? The people eater, and he's just playing with him.
Just got it. Yep. And this goes back to me just like the confidence and the weirdness of this movie.
Yeah.
It's not played, like none of it's played to be like, silly nipple stuff. It's like
he doesn't draw attention to it.
No. And it's just like unapologetically like, yeah, this is weird. This is the world we're in.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. It's unapologetic. I love the nipple. Like, because because the scene where he rips his nipples off is he's got the leader of Gastown and hostage, and he takes him to Immortan Joe in the Citadel, and he's got like a spring-loaded spear.
Yeah.
And he's holding it back. So if he lets go, the spear goes through this guy's head, the leader of Gastown. But the end of the spear also that he's holding has chains on it that are attached to his nipples. And then ultimately he lets it go and it rips his nipples off, and he loves it.
Yeah.
What I do like that's kind of funny, but I like that it shows that he's just nuts. It's showing that as much as it's the first sign that, as much as he thinks he's doing good, he enjoys this. Because he's talking about a peaceful world, an equal world, and sharing and spread the wealth. But he loves this. He loves the bloodshed and the chaos and the violence. He loves all of it. Mm-hmm. I also noticed, I think they did the best they could, but I think it was very hard. It was very hard to keep continuity with Chris's nipple blood as it was dripping down his torso, because sometimes it changes how far down his abs it's dripped. Yeah. It's the kind of thing you watch on notice on a second watch. I have a question. Mm-hmm. So we see the bullet farm. So Furiosa's she's hiding as a boy, as a war boy, and as a boy. And during an action sequence on a way to the bullet farm, which is the first time the big fancy war rig gets taken out. It's a great sequence. She's reveals to the driver of the war rig, who is named, I'm going to call him Jack. He's got a longer name.
It's like Praetorian
Jack.
Jack, I think, yeah.
Praetorian Jack. I'm just going to call him Jack for the rest of this.
Yeah.
He sees that it's a girl, and they kind of team up, and he's sympathetic to her story. He gathers this idea that she's trying to get out of there because she's not supposed to be on the war rig. She's a stowaway. She's trying to escape and get back to the green place. She wants to go home. Mm-hmm. And so he sympathizes with her and just says, I'm going to teach you how to use the war rig. And he goes, eventually, I'll help you get back to whatever you want to do. I think it's interesting. There's a great action sequence, and that's where they first kind of meet. There's another one later. So they go to Gastown and realize that's when we've seen that Dementis is losing control of Gastown, and he says he wants a meeting. So the very next scene, they're taking the war rig back to the bullet farm, and just before they get there, Jack stops the truck, and he moves them all around because they've got an escort with the truck with the war rig, and Furiosa was driving the war rig. He moves a war boy up to the war rig. He tells Furiosa to sit in the drive the following car. which she's kind of pissed about, and he insists on it, almost like he knows they're about to get ambushed in Bullet Farm.
Mm-hmm.
A, did he know that, do you think? And B, how would he know that?
That's a good question. Like, if he did know that, was he lying to her and maybe taking her back, and then now he has a change of heart? I don't know if that's the case, but
yeah, like the reason you get the sense watching as he's moving them around, he moves her back to that car where she's by herself.
Mm-hmm.
You get the sense that he's doing it to protect her, but my question is just, what does he know he's protecting her from, or how does he know what he's protecting her from? That they're going to be, because at that point they were just never given any information to think that Dementis would try to take the Bullet Farm. He does. Mm-hmm. That's why they drive into, is they've taken the Bullet Farm and all that, but I just didn't understand why. It lets the action sequence play out really well and in their favor. But I don't know. That means the only reason he did that is because of plot.
It could be. Yeah. Is it because of that? Or is it because, he's too smart and was anticipating something, or I don't know.
George Miller. Actually, before I come to that, I have another question for you. When we see Dementis early on, and then this isn't the first time. Gastown's the first time. Anyway, once basically that younger actress who plays Furiosa is swapped out for Anya Taylor-Joy, Dementis has a brace on his leg. Do we know why?
I don't know. I genuinely don't know.
That'll be in his prequel to this prequel.
Yeah.
I just wondered because he's like limping and stuff, but we never really find out.
Yeah. It's a good question.
George Miller loves to shit all over his characters. And I love it. Like, I think it's great. That was a piece of writing advice I heard once, is that typically new screenwriters are too nice to their characters because they like them. They made their characters, they love their characters, so they're too nice to them. And my God, George Miller, who seems like a very nice man, hates his character. Like, he
puts him through it.
He does. But what's interesting is, like, Jack, we grow to like. It's kind of vague whether him and Furiosa are in love or if it's just more of a brother sister. He seems to take on more of a sort of a brother figure, older brother kind of figure to her, and protects her and tries to teach her and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. But he dies without ceremony.
Yeah.
They chain him to the back of a bike and just drive for hours in a circle until he's, I assume, just all his skin's gone.
Yeah.
But it's done. We don't get a close up of it. We don't get a big reveal of it. We don't get nothing. They chain him to a bike. All we get is enough information to know that they're just going to start dragging him around in a circle. And that's it. We never really go back to him.
Yeah.
But he's done, and everything he puts Furiosa through.
Yeah. I think that's effective because it's like, I feel like a lot of moviegoers and things might be like, okay, how are they going to get out of this one? And it's just, no, they're not going to. He's not gonna let him off the hook.
We were talking about prequels, and I think some of the criticism people would give to any prequel is that, well, we already know what the status quo is for the movie that followed this, so why do I need to watch it? I think this movie is a good example of a story is more about the journey and not the destination. For one, but I feel like a lot. For one thing, I got most of the way through this movie before I was like, oh shit, she's still got to lose her arm because she doesn't have. She's missing her left arm in Fury Road, and that's harrowing. The way she loses it. I thought it was interesting because early on in the movie when she's kidnapped because she wants to find a way home, she draws a star map on her arm, apparently with some really good ink, or she tattooed it on her arm. It's a star map to hopefully get her home. Mm-hmm. And that's the arm she loses.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because as we know it, to some degree, she has this like tattoo on her arm to find her way home. But her losing her arm, she's kind of, and after that is when she's really consumed by revenge against Dementus. Do you think she wants to get home at that point? Does she care to go back to the green place?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's it's heartbreaking to us seeing it happen. But then I guess we don't ever get that thing where she's mourning it as much as we are. But yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I know that, Fury Road is all about her getting them back there and getting back there. So maybe it's just that him being like, okay, we have a whole movie about her getting back there. So this is a very unfortunate thing, but now we're focusing on the revenge part of it. Then that could be it. I don't know.
Well, that's it. And I actually really like, and it doesn't end in a big, there's some action scenes, but the climax of this movie is not a big fight. She has him dead to rights, and they talk for a bit, and she kind of toys with him, and they have a conversation. But I think it's really interesting because he talks about revenge, and that, again, because once he takes over Gastown, if we can go back to his cape is now black. And I think that means he's lost hope. And in fact, he screams that at Furiosa and Jack when he captures them, because he says something about, when you guys do stuff like this, because he's lost control of Gastown. He says the day he got Bullet Farm, it got destroyed. And he says it's forcing him to be Dark Dementus, and Dark Dementus can't be soft. And he's saying, he's trying to rationalize, well, I have to murder you too now. I have to kill you too, because if I'm not, there's no control. He's losing his plan or whatever. But he says he has to be Dark Dementus. I think he's lost hope. He's lost hope in this idea. I think now he just wants power. But that's why he says to Furiosa at the end, he goes, his lesson, his arc is that you learn hope won't let you survive in the wasteland. Hate does. And really hates what brought her this far. And kind of this, he gives this idea that they're both the same in that regard, that she is consumed by hatred. And that's why I ask, like, once she loses her arm, is this kind of showing that she doesn't even want to go home anymore? All she cares about is killing this guy.
That's interesting. And I think you're right. I think he kind of learns hate will help you survive in the wasteland. And I feel like this whole movie, he's just trying to, they talk about him losing his family. He's trying to fill that void with, gaining followers, and even with her trying to get a replacement for his like children, basically. And I think by the end, he's just like, this isn't, you're right. I think has transferred now to just like, power is what's going to keep me going. Him realizing that he can't replace what he lost, and that the only thing he wants to do now is just gain the power to destroy anybody else's hope, I think. And he's for a future.
Clearly he's gone more and more insane as the years have gone on. But I like even when Furiosa kind of, I say chase him down in a car, he's on foot and he's limping. She even messes with a little, but she gets out of the car and she's finally face to face with him for the first time in a long time. She's wearing the cape, the black cape. And I think, again, she's lost hope. I think he's right. But as a result of their conversation, I think she changes her mind. And I like that she even tells him, my childhood, my mother, I want them back. And he tells her, anything you do here is not going to give you what you want. I think it's such a well done scene of a villain speaking sense, but not just speaking sense. So much to the point, he's right. He is 100% right about her. It's the aftermath of that conversation that she changes, and she has to find hope. And I do like the historian starts narrating how he was killed. Dementus was killed. The funny thing is, if you Google how did Dementus die, people have fan theories. Guys, it's in the movie. It's in the movie, right?
Yeah.
He's got a dick tree.
There's not much coming back from that.
I will admit, because there, again, a lot happens in that movie. I missed a lot my first watch because there's a lot to absorb. I missed the fact that was him growing the tree. I missed that was him, but the second watch, that's what she did. She took him back to the Citadel. And I mean, we're going to completely gloss over the science, the biology, how any of that makes sense. That she grew a peach-bearing tree out of his dong. I don't know.
Who knows?
How he survived, I have no idea. But I liked it. And it's what a George Miller way to end this movie of like, that's her hope. That's him finally doing good rather than just doing evil. Is what if his body was used to fertilize a tree? Mm-hmm. And he's like getting eaten by maggots and it's disgusting.
It's gross.
It's very gross.
But, that's what this movie is, though. But, and I love the, that's kind of the end. But then I really love the kind of Rogue One ending of this movie that just kind of really puts us right into the start of Fury Road, too. Because, I mean, you could end this movie and pick up Fury Road and it's almost a continuation, which is cool.
Yeah, and you know what? You're right. And I wasn't the first time I watched this, and I didn't go back. But the second time, I was like watching for it. That is Charlize in that shot, right? Like that's 100% her. I was kind of looking because when she walks into the wives, and it's been a while since I recognize Zoe Kravitz. Mm-hmm. I was trying to decide because the way it's shot, it's very heavily backlit. So I'm like, is that actually Zoe or is that face replacement Zoe? And I didn't recognize any of the other. I didn't recognize any of the other wives as his wives. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, that was cool. And they got the war rig and all that. But it was nice.
Yeah.
It was one thing I loved about this movie though, is I loved the ending of Fury Road, but man, this really beefs up the ending of Fury Road.
Yeah.
Because we're going to spoil a movie that's almost 10 years old, but at the end, she tries to get back to the green place. Furiosa does, and it's gone when she gets there. And that's about the midpoint of the movie. So they go back to the Citadel. They take over the Citadel. And that's really how it ends is presumably she's running the Citadel where all the food and water exists. So she's running the Citadel. And it's nice. She has this peaceful ending to her story, and this makes it even better.
Yeah. And it makes Fury Road feel even more like Furiosa's movie as well. Yes. More so than we even thought it was after just Fury Road came out.
There is nothing wrong with Fury Road being more about her. In fact, it's an interesting way to go about a franchise, and I kind of hate to call this a franchise because it's not like any other. But this idea that this character, Max Rockatansky, floated around the wasteland and people just tell stories about him. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's all the same guy. Maybe it's a different guy. Who knows? But I like that. And that's why. But I think the way to keep that going is 4 movies in. How much more was there to say about Max? Mm-hmm. So what if he's present, but he's not the main character anymore?
Yeah, that's true. And I wonder, I don't remember the first 3 movies that well. I wonder if it's worth going back to watch just to see if they feel like they're stories that are just through his viewpoint and less about him specifically. I'm curious. Because I genuinely don't remember if that was the case. And if so, then that's kind of cool. But I feel like they probably were more about his journey and specifically.
I think they probably are about him and probably more about him. And I think, like we talked about, the first Mad Max is nothing like these, absolutely nothing like it. And I think, George Miller was just kind of finding his footing with it. But I think he's played it off well with the idea that these are not drowning in consistent lore, chronological lore. They're stories being told. And because people just obsess over canon of franchises, I kind of like that he's just like, this is whatever it needs to be, whatever we want it to be.
Yeah.
So it's about big cars and ugly girls, and it's basically a Fast and Furious movie. Yeah, nipples, rock hard nipples. Just like a Fast and Furious movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think I saw that, they asked Chris Hemsworth like what the Mad Max franchise means to Australians, and I think it means a lot more to them than it means to anybody else around the world, or at least those first 3 movies before Fury Road really took off, I think.
Yeah, I think I saw that quote too, because he said like, Americans have Star Wars, the Brits have James Bond, and Australians have Mad Max.
Yeah.
Be proud, Australia.
Yeah.
It's fun, but it's such an interesting thing because I hope, I don't know if we've mentioned this, that this movie, my God, this movie tanked. I know we mentioned that, but
yeah,
it roughly cost $168 million to make. Worldwide, it made 173. That's criminal. And I'd give a lecture right now, but you and I are part of the problem.
Yeah, we could have yeah.
We didn't fucking go.
We watched it free on Max.
We did. This is penance on our part, this thing, because we should have seen it. We should have gone to see it. But it's just, like I said, this is a movie that really does a good job illustrating why we wanted to do this podcast. And like, people bitch about a movie like Red One and like, oh, this is just generic. It's like every other fucking movie, and every movie's exactly the same that comes out. It's not. This movie was something different, but you didn't go see it.
Right.
I didn't see it either, but shut up.
We saw it now and you still haven't seen it.
You still haven't seen it. But it's, I hope he gets to make more. It just let the man do what he wants.
Yeah.
So
he doesn't have much time left. Let him make more.
I know, I was about to say that. This franchise will die with George. Like, let him make some. How old is George Miller now? I don't even know, but
I want to say 85.
Really?
That's my guess.
He is not 85. Wait. He's 79. That's still a little older than I thought.
For some reason, 84 was in my head, so I went with 85. It's still, he's not Clint Eastwood, but still.
He's getting up there, but that's a guy they keep letting make movies, and my understanding is most of them aren't very good anymore.
That's what I'm hearing. Although Juror Number 2 is apparently very good, and nobody saw it. So,
great. Now we got to cover that. Great. But no, God, I don't even know what to say about this movie, which is bad because that was kind of the whole point. But if you haven't seen Fury Road, I tell everyone all the time to watch Fury Road because it's just a phenomenal action movie. And I do think people get turned off by these movies because they're weird. They don't like them because they're weird. It's like, good. They should be weird.
Yeah.
Inject a little weirdness into your life.
I like, though, that he doesn't give you enough time to let the weirdness turn you off to how cool they are. Or it's like they don't they're weird from the start, but there's also a lot of interesting things happening that are like, okay, it's kind of grabbed me now.
And it's not bogged down. Neither of these movies is bogged down with exposition. That was one other thing I wanted to talk about, the way George Miller makes his films and why I love these, is George Miller, and I know I've talked about this before, George Miller will not treat his audience like it's stupid.
No. Which
might be why people don't go see his movies. But it's smart. He doesn't, you draw your own conclusions based on the lore. I like, in this you don't see it as much, you see it more in Fury Road, but the war boys spraying the silver paint, the chrome paint into their mouths before they die. I think it's a ritualistic thing. I think part of it's just to get them high before they die, but it's not explained. It's not like in Fury Road, Max looks to Furiosa and goes, why do they spray their mouths before they... It doesn't matter. And this movie, it draws even less attention to it.
Yeah.
I love it. I love that it happens, and you might have to draw your own conclusions, but I just love it. Actually, I didn't write this down because I wanted to see if I'd remember this shot. In the beginning of the movie, when Furiosa's mom is pursuing these guys that kidnapped her daughter, she gets back to Dementis's camp, and she has a sniper rifle, and she kills one of them, and then the other one makes it back into the camp. And I love how we go, our point of view goes to the bikers, the guy riding back in the camp with Furiosa for a bit. But when it cuts back to the mom, the opening of the shot we cut back to is a motorcycle wheel track. Tell me if you remember the shot. It's the motorcycle wheel track with 2 bullet casing next to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then it rack focuses, the focus pushes down this cliff, and you see her riding a bike down to them. And I'm like, I love that. I love that my brain instantly knew where we had cut back to.
Yeah.
By showing track with 2 casings. You piece it together quickly. That's mom. That's mom, and she's taken off. Like, he does that everywhere. Yeah,
it's smart direction. It's just like doesn't need explanation. And I think it's you talking about like, he's not precious about canon with fitting these stories in wherever they need to. I think that's part of it. It's like he doesn't care to explain why the war boys are spray paint in their mouths. It's like it's part of the story. It's not something that needs explained, and the lore of it is draw whatever conclusion you want from it. It's not essential to the story, but it's a really good addition to the world.
Yeah, and he knows the answer to all these questions. Any lore questions, he knows the answers. He doesn't need... He's not so freaking pleased with himself that he feels the need to sit there and drown us in exposition. Mm-hmm. It's funny how he seems to love his protagonists having very little dialogue. I forget. I don't know if you remember in Fury Road, people talk about how few lines Max has in Fury Road. I don't know. It's a very small number. It's like 20. Small. Yeah. It's maybe 20 lines. Furiosa has a lot more lines in Fury Road. She doesn't have that many in this one.
Yeah.
And what a fascinating, and I've heard that before. So people have said, with filmmaking, and I've even heard it referenced in comic books, is that people should be able to follow your story without any dialogue. And I think that would work with Furiosa. I think you could piece it together. So it's good. I like it. He's a filmmaker. George is a filmmaker that clearly he loves filmmaking and he respects his audience. And that's what I want. That's all I want, is someone who, this is why, and I don't know if I talked about it on this show or not. It's why I hate Fury. I think you like Fast and Furious, right?
I'd say I like the first 3.
The first
which
3.
People would say that that's stupid to like those 3. But, people are talking about like Fast 5 and it's so good. It's like, it's not. No, I'm with you that those movies. And to connect Charlize Theron again, she's in some of the later.
She is in some of those. And I want to stress, I'm not such a snob that I don't think there isn't a place for a junk food movie. Yeah. I like certain junk food movies. My problem is, and I've always said, a movie is allowed to be as stupid as it wants to be. It is not allowed to treat its audience that way, and that's what I felt like Fast and Furious does. Fast and Furious thinks its audience is so stupid. And that's where I held on longer than I should have, but that's where I gave up on Michael Bay Transformers movies. It got to the point where this is dumb, but now you think I'm as dumb as you are. And I'm not down for that. So, but yeah, George and there's a lot of excellent filmmakers, but I just saw in this so much time. He conveys a lot of information with just shots, quick shots and longer shots and establishing and.
Yeah.
Oh, one thing, I have a question. Well, 2 things. One, I'm guessing there's a version of this movie or maybe of the script or maybe nothing, but Dementis, like we see Dementis take over the gas town. We don't, and it was very kind of clever. He actually thought his way through it. We don't see him take over the bullet farm. I'm guessing there's a version of this movie where we get to see him do that. Yeah. Also, they talk about the Wasteland War, which lasts for 40 days. It's just a montage. I'm guessing there's a version of this movie with the Wasteland War. Yeah. There's probably a 3.5-hour version of this movie somewhere.
Oh, I'm sure.
This was something I wanted to bring up because I talked about how the front end is kind of long of this. And I liked the establishment of Dementis. But I feel like some of that time possibly should have been used more on more establishing of Furiosa, because at the Wasteland War, she steals the car from Immortan Joe's brothers to go catch Dementis. And as she's driving off, one of the guys goes, "Who is that?" And the historian says, "She's the darkest of angels, the fifth rider of the apocalypse." What has she done that the general public would know that? Even this historian guy, what has she done?
Yeah, that's fair.
That unfortunately, I feel like feels like very shorthanded storytelling. I feel like because, oh crap, we're running out of time. Let's just build up her allure really quickly. Like that's a rare case of telling over showing in this kind of movie.
Unless that historian is supposed to kind of be more like prophesizing about her, which
I suppose
maybe, but I think you're right. I think it's just a cool line that they wanted to maybe put in there.
Something for the trailer.
Well, yeah, exactly.
That is a line in the trailer, but that's, and I actually looked, and while I do like this movie and I like the growth of her, she doesn't do a lot, right? Mm-hmm. And I suppose the weird thing, what bothers me about that line is not so much that they didn't earn calling her that, it's that she's not supposed to be this angel of death. She's not known the wasteland over. That's not the point. So I don't know why he says that. So you're right. And maybe he says that as a prophecy. He's not wrong.
Yeah.
Calling her the darkest of angels is kind of in contrast to where she ends up. Fifth rider of the apocalypse. Sure.
Who knows?
Yeah. I don't know. Do you have anything else?
I don't think so. I think we've hit everything that I've at least had. Yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah, I think that's all we got for Furiosa. In case you missed it, check it out. Like, if you want to watch something a little different and something that's, it's made with love. We've had several movies on this show before where we talk about something that's made with love and passion. And I think this is, and it's something that's really what, and actually, frankly, if you want to see how action scenes are supposed to be done, you watch a George Miller film.
Yeah. Would you recommend people, if they haven't seen this or Fury Road, would you recommend Fury Road first?
Yes. And I know George Miller has said you can watch Furiosa without watching Fury Road. I feel like a marketing person told him to say that. While I think you can follow Furiosa without seeing Fury Road. You can follow Furiosa, but you will not care.
Right.
So if you want to care, then watch Fury Road first. And also, we shouldn't have to convince you to watch Fury Road. It's fucking awesome. Like,
it's awesome.
It's so good.
It's better than this, but
if you're listening
shorter,
to this,
I think
it is probably Furiosa is the longest Mad Max type movie.
Yeah.
But if you're one of those people that just is sick of what action movies are right now, and you haven't seen Fury Road, I go watch Fury Road. Like it's everything that action movies should be that aren't right now. We weren't planning on doing one about Fury Road because it was a moderate success, but yeah, go freaking watch Fury Road.
Yeah.
And Fury
was a Best Picture nominee even.
It was. It won a bunch of Oscars. Actually, that was something I wanted to point out because we do try to point these type of people out. George Miller's wife was the editor on this film. She was also the editor on. I think there were two editors on this one, but she was the editor on Fury Road, and she won an Oscar for it. The story goes that George Miller asked his wife to edit Fury Road, and she goes, "Well, I don't edit action movies. I don't think I should do it." He goes, if I think he said specifically, if I have a man do this, it's going to look like every other action movie. So she edited this, and it's phenomenal. And so
that's awesome.
Props to her too. Hang on, we're going to say her name out loud.
Yeah, we got to say it.
I got to say it. Oh my God, I was going to pull this up. I'm running to it. Margaret Sixel.
Awesome.
Margaret Sixel, wife of George Miller. Elliot Natman is also credited as editor. But Margaret Sixel, oh, she's cute. Nice pull, George. But yeah, it's excellent. So that's all we got for today. In case you mixed it, check out Furiosa. And the next one we are doing is what again, Josh?
We are going to do The Nice Guys. It's a 2016 film from Shane Black, starring Ryan Gosling and Russell Crowe. This is one I love. This movie. I haven't seen it in a while, so it's going to give me a good excuse to watch again. And Scott, you haven't seen this, right?
I have not. That keeps coming up. I should probably watch more movies.
Well, I hope you enjoy it, and we'll get into it next time.
Awesome. So yeah, The Nice Guys. Next time on In Case You Missed It. Thanks everybody for listening. We will see you guys next time.
Who do we have here? I'm Furiosa! The question is, do you have it in you to make it epic?